Later this week, Grinding Gear Games is dropping an announcement stream for the next league, and they've said that there's going to be major endgame revamps coming with it. The community's been fired up about loot for a while, and this just feels like the right time to share my own take. Now, GGG has been trending in a direction pretty consistently that makes loot feel a lot worse. And I think understanding why that direction is wrong matters way more than just complaining about it. So that's what this is. It's my experience, what I think went wrong, and what I actually want to see. Quick context about me, just because I think it matters for this video. Great to meet you. I'm Atsui Inu, and welcome to my channel if it's your first time here. I started PoE back in Affliction 3.23, and I have about 2,700 hours in the game since then. I've completed all of the league challenges from 3.24 and on, and I've tried to juice lots of different types of content. I've played a pretty wide range of builds from RF to Cast When Stunned, KB, Holy Relic, Tornado Shot, Mind Over Matter, Vortex of Projection, so many more. I generally farm up a Mage Blood every league. I'm not a force of power on the economy since day one, but I'm also not a casual who just chills in white maps and quits the game. I'm somewhere in the middle. I engage with the game pretty deeply. I've watched loot design change league over league, and I participate pretty deeply in the endgame. I also want to get ahead of something. This isn't me begging my lord GGG to give me more free loot. I think rare drops should be rare and hard content should be hard. But what I care about is how loot hits the ground and what that experience feels like as a player. So let's talk about what good loot feels like. Affliction's where I started, and looking back, it's also the clearest example that I have of loot that just felt good. I was new, so I wasn't hitting mirrors or mirror shards every map and farming giga currency, but I was getting raw div orbs dropping on the ground pretty frequently. I was getting chaos orbs and Valdos and valuable div cards that I just didn't expect to see. And what made it exciting wasn't the quantity, it was the unpredictability. I didn't know what was going to drop next. Every map had this tension of what's that next pack going to drop? And this feeling made me want to kill every pack. It made me full clear every map that I juiced. It made me get stronger, juice my maps harder, hear more swings, and go through that feedback loop of getting stronger, killing faster, more loot. And that's really the essence of what makes PoE feel so good. But Affliction wasn't all roses, right? It did go too far at times. The loot ceiling, from what I've heard, was way too high. Now, I didn't experience this personally, but I've seen so many people talking about the multitude of raw mirror drops happening that league, which probably wasn't intended. And more importantly, league over league, I noticed so many day one exploits. The rogue exile interactions, the meat sack strat. A small number of top-end players figured out ways to generate insane loot almost immediately on launch. And they walked away with stacks of headhunters and mage bloods and pockets full in the first week. They flooded the economy, inflated prices, and then GGG comes by with their hammer and nerfs the mechanic, and everyone else who didn't hit that point was left in a league where the economy was in shambles. That's a real problem. But the solution to that problem is not what GGG did. The solution isn't to make loot boring, and it's not to just make loot only come from specific mechanics. This brings me to tile loot versus ground loot, a term you'll probably hear in a lot of PoE discussions. Tile loot refers to mechanics that have like a predetermined loot set when you complete that mechanic. Legion is such an easy example of this because it's got a little icon of like a chaos orb over a monster. And when you kill that monster, it drops an item from that predetermined pool. The rewards are predictable. You roughly know what you're going to get. You're just pulling the lever enough times to land on the valuable result. Comparing that to killing monsters in a juiced map and watching currency explode onto the ground somewhere you didn't expect, which is the ground loot, right? Tile loot isn't inherently bad, it just doesn't scale with the map's difficulty itself. Legion is actually pretty good tile loot, and the pool's meaningful, and the rewards feel worthwhile. But tile loot starts to become a problem when it's the only way that you can get valuable rewards, and that's exactly where we are. So here's the problem right now, right? In 3.27, natural map mobs dropped essentially nothing. really in a corrupted 8 mod map with 100% plus quant drops nothing significant on its own. And this is not a really great interaction. The only path to reaching value is running the mechanic you choose for tile loot and largely ignoring the rest of the map. And the behavioral consequence of that is that when ground loot is dead, you stop caring about the map itself. You stop wanting to full clear. You stop killing every pack. You just beeline it to the Legion or the Ritual or whatever. You do your mechanic and you dip as quickly as you can. Wanting to kill every pack was something that is actually desirable. It makes ground loot meaningful. It makes the game feel fun. And when the game stops feeling like a game and starts feeling like a conveyor belt to a specific mechanic, you're not mapping anymore. You're just doing that one thing that you're doing. And that's not as fun. Another unfortunate thing is that I've noticed GGG has a hard time learning from both their wins and their losses. Now, when it comes to things like Affliction, for example, the community loved Affliction. The ground loot, the unpredictability, the swings, that feeling of not knowing what's coming next. But while there were some problems, GGG over-nerfed it. They gutted it into a Scarab, a singular Atlas point, and a random proc that shows up in your map when you're not asking for it. Thinking back to PoE 2's launch, they, at that time, deleted quantity from gear in PoE 1. The MF culling meta, where there were small portions of build vacuuming up all the loot and playing in party play. And despite that, loot still felt good afterward. You didn't need quant on gear for the game to still feel rewarding. But then they launched PoE 2, and in PoE 2, they shoved quantity into their rarity stat. And it's the same problem, but with a new flavor. Back in 3.26, Merc League, having a Merc in your map gave you that 50% extra quant bonus. Loot felt so good and people were having fun. And they weren't implemented into the game yet because they weren't ready for full implementation, which is fine, but they also, at the same time, demolished a huge portion of the ways that you could juice your maps. That feeling of good loot disappeared twice over, once when the mechanic left, and again because the baseline was worse after their changes. They also didn't learn from T17 maps. When T17s launched, people hated them. The mods were so oppressive. They required your builds to be both a great mapper and a great bosser. And a lot of mods just bricked specific builds entirely. GGG's solution was saying, well, T16.5s are going to be our middle step to T17s. But these maps still have these oppressive mods, which still require bossing and mapping in the map. Like, the solution of players hate this thing was, here's a slightly smaller version of the same thing. There's this pattern where GGG builds something great and then breaks it trying to fix the edge cases and doesn't protect what was good about it. Or they see a problem and solve it in a way that recreates the same problem that we already ran into and solved for. So here's a little bit about my 327 experience. In 327, I played KB Ellie. I farmed Legion on 8 mod corrupted T16 Dune maps, and over 20 map runs on average, my result was probably 0 divs and maybe a fortunate card. And all of my raw div drops came from incubators, which are a legacy dated crappy mechanic where you just count down the timer until your reward hatches. I didn't get the most profit from playing the mechanic. I got the most profit from hatching eggs. I tried to scale it up with the Legion Scarab of Eternal Conflict, which frequently gave me game side frame drops so bad that it was basically unplayable. So I pivoted away from that. I tested around with King's March just for fun, trying out the mappers. And interestingly enough, King's March mappers got better loot than I did playing the game myself. And so my sessions became, let's manage my gold and keep the mappers running. But it's like, what am I doing? Am I even playing the game at that point? I'd scrapped that test pretty quickly after that. And KB got a little boring for me because It was fast, but it had no unpredictability. It was kill legions, move on, 0% chance of a surprise. And my build was so bad at bossing. So I built a second character to kill the Ubers, finish the challenges, and then quit the league. And that's the experience. That's what it felt like. Now, I do want to say with these T16.5s and 17s that build disabling mods are not difficulty. They're just friction. Build disabling mods don't make the game harder. They make it more annoying. Nobody runs minus 20% to all max res. They don't run reflect if it doesn't work with their build. And petrification statues making you die because you can't move anymore forces you into builds like Jug or Trickster. These don't create skill challenges. They create wasted time, wasted chaos orbs, rolling maps. And this is literally why people used to bulk buy regex rolled maps on TFT for years, and they were paying a premium to skip this friction. That problem was finally addressed with T16s through async trade, and then they reintroduced it with T16.5s and 17s. Friction is not difficulty. Real difficulty is monsters that are more dangerous, more tanky, a map that's hard because you might die, not hard because your build stops working. So here's the actual constructive part. I want to see less tile loot and more ground loot. The Atlas passive changes that destroyed map mod effect and quant scaling pushed everyone predictable mechanics and farming those. Reverting or reimagining those changes would go a long way in terms of improving ground loot. I also want to see Grinding Gear games iterate on their successes. Affliction had the right feeling. The numbers might have been a little bit off at the top end. The exploits that we saw in later leagues were real, but the core experience was great. And the answer to that is tuning the numbers to protect the experience, not delete and mechanic involved completely. I also think that it's a great learning to remember that a difficulty lever goes a long way. You can scale up the difficulty of your maps, give monsters more life, more damage, higher density, and that'll reward you with more unpredictable ground loot. Not harder maps through build disabling friction that just makes you want to re-roll your maps for 20 minutes. I really hope that they think hard before they remove something fully or nerf it into the ground. I am cautiously hopeful about what GGG announces this week. I've put 2,700 hours into the game because it can feel amazing. That feeling is real, it's awesome, and it's worth protecting. I just hope that they remember what it felt like when ground loot was fun.